It played a key role in the development of the Clifton Heritage Park and the Clifton Heritage Authority in order to protect these areas of New Providence Island from real estate development and environmental ruin. In January 2012, she created a blueprint for the government's National Environmental Plan for the Bahamas, A Living Future. This document outlines a plan for environmental laws intended to protect, preserve, conserve, and sustain the Bahama Islands into the future. In 2013, Mrs. Duncombe was invited to join Save the Bays Environmental Group to continue the work she began at Clifton Heritage Park. Since then, she has worked tirelessly to preserve the unique marine environment not only in Clifton, but throughout the country. Mrs. Duncombe considers herself a patriot who has brought attention to critical ecological issues, often standing alone in championing changes in legislation. She continues her lifelong mission, driven by a passion to protect the beautiful Bahamian island from destruction. Again, we congratulate Sam for her award. And just so you know, the International Woman of Courage Award was established in 2007 by the Department of State. Each year during this time, American embassies around the world pause for a moment to celebrate acts of courage and determination by women who have made a difference in their communities and in their country. The particular details and circumstances of each of these women may differ, but they are linked together by their exceptional courage and leadership in advocating for human rights, women's equality, and social progress, sometimes at great personal sacrifice and danger to themselves and those that they love and serve. And this was an award that was implemented in 2007 by Condoleezza Rice of the United States. And so again, we congratulate Sam Duncombe. The Department of Gender Affairs within the Ministry of Social Services has organized a Women's Power Forum, which again starts this morning at the Harry Seymour Library at the University of the Bahamas. Tonight at 8 p.m., a special video will be aired on ZNS on the challenges and opportunities experienced by our women in the Family Islands. The theme for International Women's Day is Press for Progress. During the 60-second session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which takes place March 12th to the 23rd in New York, the priority theme is the challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls who make up 1/4 of the world's population. United Nations Secretary General, in his address on International Women's Day, said the most important objective of the United Nations as an organization is the empowerment of women. As an organization, the United Nations has created parity at all levels of the business. In the Bahamas, if we are truly interested in gender equality in government, in the private sector, law, education, sales and marketing, science and technology, we must continue to press for progress and create parity at all levels. Of particular note, the participation, representation, and election of women in government in the Bahamas remains a work in progress. We must continue to press for progress in this area. Today should be a day of reflection and a day to call for change. There are many women in our country who are doing extraordinary things in their small ways to continue the movement toward equality. On a broader scale, we must also consider the implementation of the sustainable goals. Two of those goals include achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, and to ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning by 2030. I call all women to action in our country, every female leader of every organization, every woman who leads in the home, and together we must continue the movement. Let's press for progress in 2018.
Madam President, may I just simply rise to associate myself with your remarks commemorating International Women's Day, and also giving recognition and praise to Fortini Sam Duncombe. She was an old school mate of mine many, many years ago. That's only to age myself, though not to age her. But we do glory in her relentless defense and activism on behalf of environmental issues, which has, over the decades, I think, greatly sensitized the broad populace of our country at every social level to the need always to have regard to the protection of our natural heritage and our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bethel.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me, from this side, join in with the remarks on this special day. And of course, your own leadership in this chamber has to be recognized, and all those females who serve in this chamber. It is always a matter of regret to me that we've not formally recognized the role that women play in our society. I gave the experience once of going to 7 funerals when I was the representative on one Saturday between about 10 and 1 o'clock. And when I looked in the church, each church that I went into, every role in the church was run by women, from the organist to the choir director to the assistant pastors, but you know, the lead was always a male. So there's another step, and that's the glass ceiling which women have to shatter in terms of political participation, and that is at the very highest levels in being elected to office. And so we applaud the role of women. I remember so many of them in my own life, beginning with my mother, who was equal to her husband in every way. And women like, I remember Lillian Coakley at the Southern Library. And, you know, my leaving Dr. Eneas, my mouth hurting because I'd just been to the dentist, and I go up to Lillian Coakley and she's saying, "Son, what are you crying for?" And she goes into a purse and gives me 3 threepence, and, you know, and gives you the confidence, just go over there and read a book. So that's the kind of encouragement. And at every level, women have provided this example. The women's movement has been so successful in the country that today, in so many of the professions, law being the major one, women have certainly outnumbered men in terms of the graduates, in terms of the absolute numbers. And so your women are on a good track, and men would take a page from that movement to encourage young boys as they develop into their manhood. So I thank you and congratulate all women on this day.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Anna Faye Ferguson Knowles.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I stand to align myself with the comments that you said in the room, and I say a happy World's International Women's Day to all women. I think of those women in the family of Ireland who have been so pivotal to my life, who has been the bedrock of the settlements all over the islands. And I thank God for what they have been still in us. Madam Senator, you yourselves, among many Bahamian women, have been leaders in this Bahamian community. And I salute all of you. I thank God for all of you. And I can only say that our minister who's responsible for women's agenda in this part of the vineyard, the Honorable Lanisha T. Rowe, is doing a wonderful job in highlighting the issues of women and to see how well we can reach that point where we could be happy about the equality, the gender, as it relates to gender in this Bahamas. And so on that note, I want to say happy World's International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anna Faye. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jenny Dotson-Isaac.
Good morning, fellow senators, and I would like to particularly wish all of the female senators happy International Women's Day, and of course to the men to continue to support the women in our advancement. I just wish to say that today is International Women's Day, and I wish all of the women in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, particularly those in the trade union movement whom I serve, a happy International Women's Day. We have to remember particularly those women throughout the Family Islands, as the United Nations in particular is recognizing rural women during this day. And so we want to say, particularly to the Family Island women, that they are just as important as those in Nassau and Grand Bahama and should be receiving all of the same benefits as women. We know that we've made great advances, particularly in the Bahamas when it comes to the women's movement. However, throughout the world, there are still many injustices being done to women, from human trafficking, from sexual abuse, sexual violence, all forms of domestic violence. Some of them are refugees. They experience genital mutilation. There are a number of things going on. We don't quite see that in the Bahamas, but yet we need collectively, particularly I think as parliamentarians, to lend a voice to what is happening to women throughout the world. And I think the conference that me and Senator Knowles attended with Parliamericas indicated that we need to garner the support of everyone. This is not just about women. We have to include men as well, to ensure that our goals and objectives are met. And our goals and objectives should be, in particular, to end all violence against women, which is a part of the Sustainable Development Goals. And they want to end all forms of violence against women in 2030. And that is very, very important. I think we, particularly those in the Senate, should strive to advocate and to promote that cause, particularly internationally as well as regionally and nationally. So I just want to say on behalf of myself and the entire trade union movement to wish all women a happy International Day and say to them, let us work together as we press for progress, which is the theme of International Women's Day, that we press forward united, committed, together with one voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators, for those comments on International Women's Day. Messages from the Governor General?
None.
Messages from the House of Assembly?
None.
Laying of documents by ministers?
None.
Communications by ministers? Communications by senators? Before Senator Mitchell takes the floor, I just want to indicate that communications are sent. We found that the information that the senator wants to bring forth is not contentious in any way, but of quite national importance. So I'd ask him to stand now with his communication.
One second.
Well, live streaming, as far as I'm concerned, as President of the Senate, I believe that all forms of social media and what we need to do to communicate with the public is acceptable. I do want to say that holding the cell phones at this table is not acceptable. And so if you want to have your comments streamed, please make sure that the persons are in the gallery for the future. I'm not speaking to you specifically, Mr. Mitchell, for today, because you're not holding your phone up at this table. Secondly, I want to just make sure that the communication that you are bringing forward is what has been sent, that I have read, and I believe the Leader of the Opposition has read and as written. Thank you very much.
Lead of government business.
Yeah.
Madam President, this is a statement which has been approved by the highest levels of our party on behalf of the opposition. By agreement with the government leader, we present to you our statement from the opposition on immigration laws and the question of citizenship. It is no secret that these have become an instant issue in our country because of recent rulings which are now under appeal, but in our view, question the principles upon which Bahamian citizenship is conferred at birth and the principles upon which they are conferred by the executive. And further, it is necessary to confirm that it is the executive as authorized by Parliament and the executive or cabinet which has the sole right to confer citizenship upon those upon whom it is not conferred at birth, and to make decisions about immigration status while in the Bahamas. There is, in our view, indiscriminate and loose talk about the country, that there is an ambiguity about who is a citizen of the Bahamas or entitled to be registered as one. The Progressive Liberal Party's position is that there is no ambiguity, The framers of our Constitution wrote precisely what they intended it to be. The only persons who are able to claim citizenship of the Bahamas by birth are those whose married parents are Bahamian and their children are born in the Bahamas. Those born overseas to a Bahamian father married to the mother of the child. Those born to a single Bahamian mother anywhere in the world. The exception to conferring birth when born overseas to a married Bahamian father or a single Bahamian mother is when that parent obtained their citizenship comes by reason of the exception in Article 3.2 of the Constitution. For example, Sir Sidney Poitier, who became a citizen of the Bahamas by virtue of his father being a citizen of the Bahamas, could not pass on his citizenship to his children at birth because they were born overseas. If you do not obtain citizenship of the Bahamas by birth or descent, then you have to apply for citizenship, and it is up to the minister responsible for nationality to grant you citizenship or not, after the appropriate application is made. There is nothing that is ambiguous about this. The mischief comes when advocates argue that because someone is born in the Bahamas to non-Bahamian parents and applies pursuant to the Constitution after their 18th and before their 19th birthday, that they have an automatic entitlement to citizenship of the Bahamas and cannot be expelled from the country. This is not so. They, like everyone else, must apply, and unless they have a residency status for the Bahamas, they are subject to exclusion for the Bahamas through the normal immigration processes. The Immigration Act was amended in 2015 to allow a special residency status for those in that position, but without some residency status, there is no special exception for them. Those who miss the constitutional deadline of one's 19th birthday lose the right to apply under that provision, but may apply if they are otherwise qualified under the general law pursuant to the Bahamas Nationality Act, which provides for the minister to grant citizenship in certain cases. A great deal of noise and confusion has been spread in the marketplace by these recent cases. The principal attorney in these cases is Fred Smith, QC, and he is the front individual for an ad hoc association called Rights Bahamas. He has been espousing a view of the law which is wrong. Recently, a pamphlet came to the attention of the Attorney General, which was described by the Attorney General as containing inflammatory remarks about the state of the law. We say that is putting it mildly. The pamphlet contains scandalous and defamatory remarks about me personally. There is a long history of this with regard to me and our own party and this group and individual. And I have tried from my time in public office to warn the public about the fundamental dishonesty and unhinged nature of the statements emanating from that quarter without success. One has only to see the response from Fred Smith, QC, to the Attorney General's measured public statement in reply to the erroneous and inflammatory pamphlet to confirm that Mr. Smith's opinions are unhinged, unpatriotic, and irresponsible. The Bahamas is a free and democratic state with an abiding respect for the rule of law, fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, and a long history of a civic polity.
Mr. Senator, I'd like you to just be mindful that in your next paragraph there are some words that I would say might seem unparliamentary that you may want to consider not using. And that would be the third line, the first word there, because I want you to be very careful. I believe that the communication that you're bringing forward is certainly important, but I want to make sure that we're not using words against members in the public that we may not need to do and defend outside. So I would like you to consider that next paragraph very carefully.
I'm sorry. The point I've made throughout this statement is not to address the individual specifically, but actions. These words that were used are in the public domain and evidence before international bodies by this individual.
I still would ask you to consider that third line and the word that you're about to read. If you could please consider
the third line.
Yes.
He accused the immigration.
I don't need you to read it, because
I'm
if you
saying, is
read
that
it,
the
you'll
line
put
you're
in the
talking
record.
about?
No, I'm talking about the next paragraph that you're about to read.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. So you're saying to delete that line?
Yes.
Okay. During my time in office, he accused the Immigration Department of Gestapo tactics. He accused the immigration.
That is exactly what I was
I'm
talking
sorry.
about.
I thought you said the third line. Okay. I'm sorry. All right.
Please remove that word.
Okay.
I would ask that word to not be used.
That word, that particular word.
That particular word.
Okay, I thought. And so
And you
what?
you can ask now for that to be withdrawn, please.
Okay, I withdraw the word. And he accused the Immigration Department. You do not wish that? Okay. So he obtained the declaration against the Bahamas government in the international community based on false information. It appears that the extent to which he will go for his personal agenda is unbounded. In an intervention on radio some 2 days ago, he claimed the Immigration Department was corrupt to the core. There is no evidence to suggest that either. Whatever the agenda is, it must not be allowed to succeed if it is, as it appears, to be designed fundamentally to undermine the state of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We therefore support the response of the government to the most recent pamphlet and deplore the response of Mr. Smith itself as cowardly. I would only say a coward knows a coward if we are going to use those words. What the pamphlet did was to invite insurrection by those who are migrants to the Bahamas, more or less, and it could not go unanswered. The PLP will not support any attempt to overthrow the government of the Bahamas by violence and insurrection. It cannot be supported. It is therefore the view of the PLP that the cases before the courts must be prosecuted to the highest courts in the land. Further, and in addition to that, the law should be amended forthwith to ensure that it is clear that it is the executive has the right to grant citizenship of the Bahamas and no one else. Further, the law should be amended to remove the element of profit from people like the individual whose firm and that type of litigation in which he engages is a profit center at the expense of the Bahamian taxpayer by adjusting, if necessary, the rule on costs of these applications in the Supreme Court. It should be juxtaposed against the invitation to migrants to sue the government so that the government will be overwhelmed with cases and bankrupt the country. We have indicated in the public domain that given the zeal with which this is being pursued and the number of illegal migrants who keep coming and continue to be defended, one must wonder whether or not the two are not working in league with one another. There is a need for us to secure our borders. We support that. We are concerned that sufficient work is not being done to secure our borders. We are concerned when ships can make their way up to the main island in New Providence without let or hindrance. This must not stand.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
The landmark case of Ryan and the Attorney General
Right.
establishes the fact that the executive grants citizenship and a judge should not substitute his own opinion for that of the executive on these matters. That is the PLP's position. If this is not clear, then the law ought to be amended to reflect that clarity and should be done retrospectively if necessary.
Let's reword the beginning of the next paragraph as well, as you have been doing.
If it is affirmed at the policy court level that there will be thousands of people waiting in our neighbors next door who do not have the right under the existing legal interpretations to citizenship, who are waiting for these cases to succeed, then the country can be overrun with migrants claiming citizenship, the likes of which we have not seen. I'm talking about people who claim they were born here, were taken back to their home countries before their 18th birthday, and missed the deadline for application before their 19th birthday. If it is argued successfully, then once you miss the deadline, you still have an automatic entitlement to citizenship, then our country can brace for problems. Similarly, if the courts affirm that every irregular migrant has to appear before a court and be convicted before he can be expelled from the Bahamas, both the Department of Immigration and the prison can be overwhelmed. This would mean that the Immigration Department will no longer be able to simply return a tourist not entitled to land here on the plain and send them home without that person appearing before a court and being convicted. It is our view that as the law now stands, it is adequate to deal with any issues which may arise. Section 6 of the Bahamas Nationality Act now allows the minister to grant citizenship to any child, for example. It appears to us that the gravamen of the complaints is that of the administrative issues of the existing laws. We think that the new equipment acquired by the Department of Immigration will resolve these issues. We think that the Director of Immigration should have the unfettered power to withdraw from the Bahamas anyone who is not a Bahamian or a permanent resident of the Bahamas subject to law. The thought that everyone in such a position must be brought before a court and found guilty is not the law, and if the new interpretation stands, is unsustainable. The Department of Corrections is already feeling the weight of these unwise decisions. The detention center is a perfectly lawful place for the detention center of anyone who finds themselves without status in the Bahamas. Any abuses, in our view, can be corrected by appropriate administrative actions and third-party oversight. We support the implementation of the rules for the detention center, which we have drafted before we lost office. The opposition wishes to thank the Director of Immigration, the Department, its officers, our police force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, for all they do, along with customs and other public officials, to ensure that we are safeguarding our borders. Finally, I wish to address the migrant community in the country. This is a welcoming country for all who choose to migrate here lawfully. While here, we urge you to conform with the law, and there will be no issues about your tenure in the Bahamas. Resist all attempts of people to mislead you about the law. Conform to the democratic norms of our society. There will be no trouble. We thank all who do this and work to build up the common life of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We believe that all of this requires the urgent attention of the government, and we will support the measures that are necessary to prevent this mischief from going any farther afoot. Thank you, Madam Speaker. President.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel. Yes.
Yes.
Ordered that the document do lie on the table. The 8th of March, International Women's Day.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me say that, broadly speaking, the expression of support for the due and lawful enforcement of the laws governing citizenship, the grant thereof, and also the laws enforcing our immigration laws by our immigration defense force and other law enforcement agencies in a lawful manner, we can broadly and embrace and agree with the leader opposite on. I personally regret and think that to the extent that any name was called is perhaps allowing oneself to be baited. Many of the things that were said that may have provoked that name being called was said about me, is about the fascist national movement in an advertisement, etc. The point is, though, that for me and the government that I serve in, we won't respond to these ad hominem personal name-calling vitriol, such as was displayed in response to what I thought was a measured and balanced statement that I put out, and the response thereto was personal. I didn't call anybody's name. I put out a position to address what I thought were misstatements of the law. All of that being said, I just regret that any name was called, because that just isn't the way to do it. Let them call our names. We're in public life. I glory to this extent in all social activism. It keeps governments honest. It may be overstated, it may be outrageous at times, but it's a necessary component of a democratic society to have the ability for activists and activist voices, yes, to go to the extremes of expression, but not to cross the line. Because that's the problem. There is a line that guides and limits all freedoms. Any freedom you have is always subject to a line, because when your freedom impinges on somebody else's freedom, that is the line. When your freedom to express yourself impinges upon defaming your country, In my view, that's the line. You don't defame your country. You may speak the truth about your country, but don't defame it. Don't concoct something from all over the world to blacken the, no, not blacken, besmirch or smear or plaster over the face of your country when it is not your country shown. That being said, I merely wish to say that the government of the Bahamas is intent upon allowing the law to take its course. The matter is before the Court of Appeal. It will be addressed in the Court of Appeal. I don't ever like to say what will happen after, because then you're prejudging something, or, you know, it is in the Court of Appeal and will be addressed there. It will be addressed on a fundamental way and in a way that is consistent with the law hitherto, prior to this. There's nothing more that I can say. But I will say this, that the state always reserves the right, once the law is authoritatively stated, to look at it, and if it can be cured by legislation, so to do. We are, though, not at that stage yet. We are following the legal process, and we're showing the maximum respect to that process and to the courts to which we will appeal, the court that we are appealing to. On that note, I just really wish to say one thing. One more thing. That the government of the Bahamas understands full well that its first and paramount duty is to defend the Bahamas. More than that, I need not say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. It's always refreshing to see both the Leader of the Opposition and Leader of Government Business seemingly on the same page. If we continue in that trend, we may get some things done in this country. And I hope to see more of that as we move along. Or we agree. Do you agree? You're missing on agreement? You are, where possible? Isn't it nice for both of you to have some agreement on some things? Boy, I tell you, we have a long way to go. We'll move to the order of business. Questions? The
No
President
questions.
doesn't give trick questions.
No questions.
Answers to questions?
None.
Presentations of petitions?
None.
Appointment of select committees?
None.
Report of committees?
None.
First reading of bills?
None.
Second reading and committal of bills?
None.
Committee of the whole Senate?
None.
Third reading and passing of bills?
None.
Consideration of House amendments?
None.
Resolutions? Discharge of select committees?
None.
Notices for future meetings?
I'd like to renew all notices of the opposition.
I would similarly wish to renew all notices in the name of the government and give notice that at our next meeting we intend to move with the debate on the Proceeds of Crime Act and the Financial Transactions Reportings Act. We hope to get through that debate in one day, and we will adjourn within that same week to commence the budget debate on the midterm budget. Thank you.
Orders for clerk? Adjournment?
Madam President, I beg leave to move, if I may obtain a seconder, that the Senate do now adjourn sine die.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn sine die. All those in favor would say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate now adjourns sine die.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
This is a final adjournment. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate adjourn sine die. All those are in favor would say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is adjourned sine die.
And I know the Senate do now adjourn.